Good evening, class. I'm finally getting to lesson 6 of our book, where we do the mask and channels, and we take our model here and we are going to edit her to show a shadow behind, tilt her head backwards, and then in the end we're going to use our model for a magazine cover. First thing we need to do is check our layers and make sure the model is selected. Then we're going to come up to select and mask. It provides us with the onion skin overlay. Well, we want to switch this to overlay, and it gives us this background. Next thing we need to do is select subject. And right away, the model pops out at us and we see things. This is already our selection. This is exactly what we need. The next steps we're going to do is make sure that we include pieces of her hair that may be missing. We're going to refine it a little bit. That's in the next step. To do this, we're going to zoom in on an area that we need to fix a little bit. My zoom tool. Wrong button. That did not zoom like it was supposed to. Zoom in on this area. You can see the areas that's missing. So quick selection tool, drag in and select the shirt, pieces of the shirt that are missing. Kind of see it. If you do too much, go back to your minus tool and remove that set. If you need to refine your brush to get rid of some of it, that's fine as well. I don't want you guys focusing on this too much to be too perfect, because it'll end up dragging you down too far. It'll just take too long. So get a good setup. Pick the things that you know that are obviously wrong, and once you're done with selecting your model, we'll move on to the next step. So once your model is selected exactly like you want her, then go back to the view, and we're going to do on layers this time. And once we're here, we're going to begin to refine our model even more. So one of the things that the book wants us to focus on is the area of her hair, so especially in the back. So let's check it out. Let's go back to our overlay, and we see that, you know what, there are some spots that we can kind of refine here. So I'm going to go back to my quick selection tool. The book says to use a pixel size of 20, but I'm going to keep it at 9. And I'm going to do add. And I'm just going to trace it in this area. And you see that it's very fickle, this tool is. Go back to the negative because I don't want that stuff picked. Round that a little bit better. There, I've added a little bit more proper to her hair, that you're going to see some of these wisps of hair that we did not see before. And then we'll move on. The book also suggests just going to like 400 magnification, just going around looking. I'm not going to bother with it did a pretty good job of keeping the background out from under her lips. And I think in general, the model looks pretty good. Maybe I'll adjust a little bit around the back here. Nope. I thought maybe I'd missed a little bit of her shirt, but we are pretty solid for our model here. So I think the next step, we're going to move on to the next step, which will begin here shortly. Part of what the book talks about next is that it says that the original image is still showing in this little loop of hair here, that if you go to the overlay, it's still there. Mine does not. It looks like a little bit might be showing there, but it's hard to tell. But it would do a little bit more editing in this area just to make sure that the background image, when you say on layers, will show everything that needs to be shown. So if you had this still showing up under your overlay as yellow, then you would need to fix that properly and then go back to on layers. And another thing to check out as we're getting to this is, let's see, fit screen, is under view, just to make sure that black and white, it kind of gives you what you're going to see of your model. So it looks like the hair could be fixed up a little bit more on their ponytail or the bun, but I am not going to worry about that right now. So I'm going to go back to on layers, and then we'll move on to the next step. So our next step that we have is just to give some global refinements, and that's underneath our properties tab here. What it asks us to do is put the smooth to 5. The feather we can leave. Contrast was 20, I believe. Let me check the book. And the shift edge was minus 15. What that does is it brings everything in 15% versus out. The contrast, you can play with it a little bit if you decide whether you want it greater or less. Remember, this does not have to be identical to the book, but the book is going to give you something good to run by. So we are nearly done with the first set of what we're doing here. We need to now just do our output. We are going to create a new layer with all this, and how that happens is we decontaminate the colors. Click on that. It does it to 100%. So watch what happens to our model as we click on that. It changes some of the things, the refinements that we did. Now, and then it creates output to new layer with new mask. So as I click on this and say OK, I now have model copy along to go with my model and magazine background. Now we are able to move on to our next step. Make sure to save your file and we will move on. All right. Our next step is where we're going to change the model's glasses to a certain, a different color. So let's use our zoom tool, and I am going to zoom in on the model's glasses here. And we also need to freeze magazine background. This allows us to give just focus on the model itself or herself. And the next step now is we are going to do a mask, and we're going to change her glasses to a color shade of green. To do this, we're going to need to switch to edit in quick mask mode, which is this button down here. So let's click on that. It should change the color of it. And then we're going to use a brush tool. Fine, there's a brush tool. The book says to use a pixel of 13, keep the hardness of 1, but you can adjust your brush as needed using your bracket keys again. Oh, after you're outside of that. So if I start clicking on here, I forgot to do one step. I need to change the color to a green, but I'm going to quickly undo that piece of it. But the brackets change your brush size. So left bracket makes it smaller, right bracket makes it bigger. So again, let's look at our model. It says to do 13 for the brush size. I'm at 15 now. I'm okay with that. And just start painting the glasses. Zoom in as necessary. I'm actually going to turn that to the 13 like they recommended. And it does say you can go ahead and go over the hair if you choose to. It's not a big deal. Oh, I went over. I did pretty bad on that coloring. I should have definitely gone smaller on my brush. But then again, I'm not too worried about it. If I did go over a little bit, I can either undo it or I'm just going to kind of straighten that line out a little bit. But my mouse control is not the greatest right now. And continue up and across, get both the frames here. So I want to make sure that I do not cover up much of the glass part. So I'm going to bring this down and come all the way around. Again, does not have to be perfect because we are very zoomed in on her right now. And as we zoom back out to our typical zoom, you won't see it as much. So once I've got this done, and I'm going to make sure I pause it while I'm doing this in the future so we're not stuck watching me do all this type of work. Looks like I'm actually going to bring that in around here. There, I'm happy with what I've got so far. It's not perfect, but we're not looking for perfection. So now once we're here and we've finished with our area, we can click Edit in Standard Mode, and we've got a selection. We've got our marching ants that they talk about. We're also, now we're going to go up to View. Select Inverse. So now it was masking that before. Now that we've got our inverse selected, we can change the color of the glasses. Now that we've got our marching ants, we're going to go up to View. Image, Adjustments, Hue, Saturation. And we're going to change the hue to 70. Which will give our glasses a green hue. So once that is done, we will be finished with this portion of our model. We will be ready to move on to our puppet warp now. So I'm going to do select, deselect, or remember you can hit Control D, and we'll start moving towards our puppet warp in the next step. All right, next step is the puppet warp. So we're going to go up to Edit and Puppet Warp. It brings a series of grids over the model, and we are simply going to start placing our pins where they need to be. So we'll start clicking on certain intersections and placing those pins. I need to pin depth, expansion, normal density, everything seems fine. Let's click on this corner and space them out accordingly. The more pins you put in, the more control you'll have. And it says to come up to the base of the neck. It's got a good illustration on there, or base of the head. So I'm going to come up here and kind of come across. I'm going to go across like this and then right around there, and then start working my way back down to the base of the piece. If you accidentally select on something that you don't feel like a location that you wanted, you can right click on that one and delete pin. And just redo it. You're never set in stone until you commit to it using the check mark. And I'll finish down here. So now I've got a series of pins that I'm happy with. I can't really place one, I don't think, intermediate. Oh, I can. So I felt like they needed to be at every intersection, but I think I've got a good line here that I can do. And I'm going to just double check my work and then commit to it. So now we need to select the pin at the base of the neck, and you'll notice that a blue dot will highlight in the center of it. Well, at this point, we need to hit Alt, and a circle will show up around it with a double arrow that's curved. When you start pulling back on that arrow, that's where it'll start tilting her head, the model's head. And we're going to try to do just a rough distance. I tend to, you know how I've said in class, I like to actually edit and use my 180 here to give me the full depth. You can't go beyond that because like let's say if I tried 190, it wants to kind of go back down. So 180 is like the greatest tilt back that I can get from the location that I've chosen. So I'm going to go ahead and commit to this now, and my model now has a tilt to her head. Now we're going to use Alpha Channel to create a shadow. So what we're going to do is control click the thumbnail, and there's my marching ants. After this, what we need to do is select and save selection. Where is that at? Save selection. There we go. And we need to make sure under channel it's new. The name of it can be whatever you prefer. So I say whatever you prefer, but the book does say to call it model outline, so I will stick with that. So the channel is going to be new. The name will be model outline, and as I do that, now I've got a new channel that's been created. You don't see it right here, but because it's under this here, we've got model outline is selected here. It's time to focus on creating our shadow layer. So what we're going to do under our menu is down here is create a new layer. If you hover over it, it says create a new layer. And we want that to be directly beneath the model copy because we want the shadow to be beneath the model so it doesn't take precedence. We're going to rename this layer shadow. Enter. And with it still selected, we're going to come up to select the mask. This is one we want to be on black. And there's some adjustments we're going to make to the refinements here. We're going to change the shift edge to 36%. Which actually moves it out a little bit. You can see the background kind of spreads out further from, because anything positive moves it out from the model, anything negative brings it in towards the model. We're going to say for output settings, make sure it still says output to selection. So now we're going to go up to edit, and we're going to go to, let me take that back. I missed one step. When you're done with the shift edge, we hit OK. That closes that back out. Now we're going to go up to edit and fill, and contents are going to be black. Mode normal. Opacity is going to change to a certain amount. I believe the book says 30%, because the shadow should not be as, it's normally not as dark as its surrounding. It's diffused a little bit. So once you've reached this point, you can hit select and deselect. And then we need to move that shadow because it's hidden directly behind our model. That'll be our next step. So now with the shadow layer still selected, we're going to go up to Edit, Transform, Rotate, and we are going to rotate this a -15. So you can either choose to do it this way, or I like to enter it in again. And then we need to move it forward as well. The book says to do X at 545, so I'm going to just change my values here. Now, the shadow has now moved forward. Now, one thing I want you to check before you complete this step is that there should be no empty space in between this. So the shadow, there shouldn't be a gap between the shadow and the model. If you're satisfied with the rotation and the distance, go ahead and commit to it. And we'll move on to the next step. This was taken approximately 18 minutes to take our model from the original position that she was in. We tilted her head back, created a shadow. Let's bring the magazine background back up. And we are ready now to do our magazine cover. This step of this project is complete. And just make sure you save your work, and we'll move on to the magazine cover.